Today we'll be talking about the Russia realm, and we start off with a few images of Russia, including famous Red Square on the left side of the image, some traditional Cossack dancers in the upper right, and the characteristic onion-domed architecture of Russia. Today we're going to be exploring Russia's physiography, climate, and biomes. We'll consider regions of the realm, we'll review the history of the Russian Empire, and identify key characteristics of the Soviet Union leading up to its fall in 1991. If we look at a map of the physical geography of Russia, its physiography, we see the Northern European plain as an extension of the Northern European plain that actually extends across into Germany and Northern Europe. We see the Caucasus Mountains separating Russia from the countries of the Middle East. We see the Ural Mountains producing an east-west trending barrier between the European-oriented part of Russia and the Asian part of Russia, and Siberia, of course, this bitter cold climates that are associated, and the Ural Mountains is a major reason because the Urals block the mild temperatures that flow inland from Europe and create a barrier. We see some of the prominent rivers, some of the world's largest rivers flowing northwards towards the Arctic Ocean. Lake Baikal, the world's deepest lake, largest by volume. And finally, the Kamchatka Peninsula extending outward to the Pacific Ocean and downward towards Japan. Okay, so we have physiography and the biomes of Russia, and there are two signature biomes that I would like to alert you to. One is tundra, which is a low-growing vegetation, spongy vegetation that is adapted to being under extreme cold temperatures and buried underneath snow for much of the year. So you'll notice that this Arctic tundra belt extends all the way across the northern half of Russia. And of course, we also see that up into northern Canada and Alaska as well. And to the south of that, we'll have a forest biome, the boreal forest, northern boreal forest, which is also known by the Russian term taiga. And this is somewhat like our pine forests of California, although smaller in stature, more stunted growth as a result of the much colder temperatures than we would receive at the latitude that we are found. Okay, so talking about climates, we will see a preponderance of D climates. If you look at the legend of the map here, you'll see that we have humid, cold climates dominating both year-round precipitation and dry winter climates. And again, this is going to be the dominant condition of much of Russia, although you will notice that there is some semi-arid conditions in the southern parts of Russia, and then also in the western parts we'll see a little bit of these milder humid temperate climates, your C climates, but for the most part we're going to see D climates dominating humid continental conditions. The condition of continentality is very characteristic of Russia. In this case, we have temperature extremes that result from continental influence. In this map, we see the blue areas indicating the highest annual temperature range on Earth, and much of Russia fits into this category. You can see Canada and parts of Alaska having a similar experience. This in contrast to those areas around the equator that have the least range in their annual temperature. again, characteristic of continentality. Coastal areas, moderate temperature, and continental land masses produce extreme temperature conditions. Okay, in discussing the realm as a whole, we will look at regions of the realm. And the country of Russia is actually divided into several regions. The Russian core, as you might guess, this is where the bulk of the population lives, where the economy is based. You can see familiar cities such as Moscow, St. Petersburg appearing on the map. You have the eastern frontier, and this frontier shares borders with Kazakhstan and Mongolia and China. Siberia, the least populated part of Russia, and then the Far East, which is lightly populated and quite bitter, cold much of the year as well. Finally, what's described as the peripheries in transition is the Transcaucasia region, including the three countries of Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. Therefore, the realm of the Russian realm constitutes just four sovereign states, Russia and the three Caucasus states I just mentioned. Okay, the boundaries of Russia obviously have changed significantly. We see a number of states indicated in colors on the western and southern periphery of the map that are former Soviet socialist republics. So all of these colored areas indicated were formerly part of the Soviet Empire, the Soviet Union, and today they have broken off into independent states. So the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic, as it was known, is now the country of Russia. And Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan are independent nations. For example, the Kazakh Soviet Socialist Republic, as it was once known, is now the nation state of Kazakhstan. Okay, this indicates the Russian core. Arguably, one of the most important parts of the Soviet Empire that was lost was the grain-growing regions of Kazakhstan, and we to this day see a strong Russian influence. You see this extends down into Ukraine. Russia famously annexed the Crimea Peninsula that I'm indicating here along the Black Sea. They still occupy the Crimean Peninsula and are a power broker in this independent state of Ukraine. Okay, so the Transcaucasia region, again, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan. This is quite an interesting geographic area and really creates something of a choke point for people moving between Russia to the north, Turkey and Iran, and the Islamic world to the south. These are very high mountains, upwards of 18,000 feet in elevation, some of the highest mountains in the world, and they are sandwiched between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. So a transition zone, to be sure, between Russia and the Middle East. Okay, there's a satellite image, Black Sea on the west, Caspian Sea on the east, Russia to the north, the Iranian plateau and Turkey to the south, and this massive mountain barrier of the Caucasus. It should be noted that the term Caucasian actually derives from this same part of the world. Okay, Russia is absolutely massive. There's no question about it. The world's largest territorial state, twice the size of number 2, which is Canada, larger than all of Europe. It includes 11 time zones in contrast to the continental U.S. has just 3 time zones. is it 4? I guess it's 4 time zones. So give you a time comparison, or a size comparison rather, on the map. And again, indicating the location of the Russian core on the pink state. The concept of distance decay is at play in Europe, in which interaction decreases with distance. So what we will see is the further one travels from the Russian core, the less contact, the less influence, the less interaction you will have. So the idea of distance decay is with distance you see a decaying of interaction or exchange. Okay, a few images of Russia. I mentioned Lake Baikal is the deepest lake in the world. As we'll learn later, one of the challenges that the Soviet Union faced was being able to maintain some sort of cohesion among this vast territory and its highly varied ethnicities of people. The woman that you see in the image here is an Inuit. These are indigenous peoples that are related to Eskimos of Alaska, and obviously don't have a strong association with being Russian, as they are far from the Russian core. The Kamchatka Peninsula, as this image indicates, this is one of the most remote parts of the globe, a volcanic island peninsula. Volcanoes dot the peninsula, and quite inhospitable. Okay, the West Siberian Plain, again, get a sense of this frigid conditions, although, as you can see in the image in the lower left, it does thaw out during the summer months, and you get a very strong profusion of growth occurring during the spring and the short summer months. And then we get into the Russian plain, which is going to include the heart of the grain growing region, the heart of the population and cultural center of Russia, and the Volga River is one of the dominant physiographic features. Here you see it traveling southward through the Russian plain to the Caspian Sea. Okay, a few primate cities. I mentioned Moscow and St. Petersburg. Moscow, of course, is the seat of the Russian government as well. Okay, St. Petersburg is said to be a beautiful city with a port on the Baltic Sea, which is a very important characteristic, and that it provides trade and access to a warm water port, which is something that Russia is sorely lacking in. Moscow is actually inland on the Moscow River. This was intentional. It was for defensive purposes. This is called a forward capital, in that they moved this capital with the express purpose of taking advantage of open territory, and also for, as I said, defensive purposes. You get a sense of the relative location of these two principal cities, the coastal city of St. Petersburg and its access to the Baltic Sea, and the interior location of Moscow. Next time we will talk about the Russian Empire.